Hello and good evening, everyone, and welcome to Private Eye Matrix Revealed on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. And once again, I'm your host, Private Eye Monique Lassan. And with me is my producer, Joe Kiernan, and Don Morshet. As always, thank you for being with me. Just wanted to let everyone know that Revolution Radio is the only 100% listener supported, so please donate so we can stay on the air. All you have to do is go to our website, www.freedomslips.com, and click donate. If you'd like to call us tonight, please contact us by calling 347-688-2902 or call my producer directly at 843-491-6077, just in case you can't get through, or Skype Freedom Screen. I had a great opportunity to invite a longtime friend of mine and associate, Dan Willis, to the show. I've known Dan for 18 years. I want to give out his website address right away, which is www.thewebmatrix.net. How apropos, there's a matrix in there. So anyways, Dan Willis is one of the Disclosure Project's top secret military witnesses that testified at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. in 2001 in front of every major media. A world disclosure event which was asking for a congressional hearing in order to bring forth the witness scientists within the Black projects who can release the technologies that have been hidden for over 60 years that could stop further damage to our planet. But instead, the message was sanitized by a controlled mainstream media. An ex-radio broadcast engineer and ABC newsman, Dan has taken a keen interest in how the media has withheld disclosure of the full message to the public, a message based on hundreds of credible military and intelligence witness testimonies. In an article Dan wrote, it left us with this profound question: who controls the agreed upon reality through the mainstream media, and why they fear disclosing the truth about the extraterrestrial reality? The answer to this question, of course, you must ultimately decide. Welcome to the show, Dan Willis. Thank you so much for being here.
What a pleasure, Monique. This is great. I mean, we've been friends for so long, and I happened to hear your broadcast, and we made contact, and I'm just one of hundreds of top secret military witnesses. And I just decided to take up the angle of why the media is continually sanitizing this information out.
Right, I know. Isn't that also true that you were the 100th witness for the Disclosure Project book by Stephen Greer?
Well, there's over 500 witnesses, but there was 100 that were
published,
documented, and videotaped,
right.
And I guess I was.
Exactly. I read it. You gave me that book back in 2000, I think it was, right before I moved to Barcelona.
At a Chinese restaurant in San Diego, yes.
Thai restaurant. I still remember. It was a Thai restaurant. You gave it to me, and it changed my life. Honestly, it did. I took it with me. I read. Huh?
I said I wish I would have done it to the representatives we gave it to in Washington. A lot of work went into putting that executive briefing document together, along with all the videotape testimonies and everything. But that's why information goes out there to change people's lives.
So why don't we just start from the beginning? How and why did the Disclosure Project came into being in the first place?
Well, that's a good question because, normally, when you think of somebody who's like the president or, a director of the Central Intelligence, you think they have a need to know for, anything, at their level. What happened back in 1993 was President Clinton had an interest in the UFO subject. So he had his director of Central Intelligence, James Woolsey, look into the classified UFO files. Well, when the director went to look into it, he was denied access. Here, a sitting head of the Central Intelligence Agency is being denied access, to these files. And
Right.
so essentially he was frustrated and because he couldn't go through the normal channels, and sought out in the civilian sector Dr. Stephen Greer, who was the head of the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence. So they had a private meeting. He brought a huge stack of paper and documentation substantiating the reality of it. The CIA's director's response was, I know this subject's real. I'm trying to figure out why the hell I can't gain access to it. Right. Dr. Greer, becoming aware of the gravity of the situation, the director of CIA is being denied access, means there's something else going on within our government.
Right.
And so he met with his military advisors back in '93, and they decided to bring forth a lot of witnesses, because when you bring forth a single witness, they're ridiculed, discredited, or worse, happens to them. Mm-hmm. So he decided to gather hundreds of witnesses. So from '93 to the year 2000, when I was videotaped, he gathered 450 witnesses, and these are generals, admirals, astronauts, high-level people, high-level security clearances, and low-level people with high-level security clearances who have, first-hand knowledge and exposure to this subject.
And how did you get involved with the Disclosure Project yourself as a witness? And you gave your witness testimony on camera. So tell me about that little scenario there. I think it's very interesting.
Well, a friend wanted to go to a UFO conference in Laughlin, Nevada, and I really wasn't interested because it was kind of like a zoo, all the UFO people and, all that stuff. Even though I had my own personal military experience, where I know for a fact that the government's aware of them, and I've had my own personal experiences with seeing them fly, 100 feet above my head. So I know the reality is real. But, I just pretty much the same old story. So I went to this conference, and I heard that Dr. Greer was going to go to Washington. Finally, somebody's not talking. They're actually going to do something and bring forth a lot of credible witnesses. So I just happened to bump into him in a cocktail party, and I said, by the way, I had a top secret clearance, and I received extraterrestrial message, about an extraterrestrial craft.
Right.
And what happened was one of the 21 witnesses that were going to go, they chickened out, and there was an opening there, and so I volunteered, and that's how I got there.
Right. Well, please explain to us what is it that you actually saw, and what did you testify to exactly?
My witness testimony was after JFK was shot, and I didn't want to exactly go to Vietnam, I joined in the Navy. My father was a career Marine with presidential honors and all this stuff, and so they gave me a high-level top-secret clearance, and I aced the code test. I was a ham operator when I was young. And so I worked in the code room at the Naval Communications Station in San Francisco for over 2 years. It was the busiest communication facility for military communications on the planet at the time. I received a message from a ship that was priority level, a secret classification, off the coast of Alaska. It was a USNS ship. The crew on board the ship witnessed coming off a port bow a brightly glowing reddish-orange elliptical object, basically a flying saucer, came out of the ocean and shot straight up into space. The radar operator tracked it with the blips going over 7,000 miles per hour. This was sent to the Chief of Naval Operations in Washington, D.C. At the time in 1969, I was looking at the San Francisco Chronicle trying to see, is there something in the, in the 50s, I used to love, the old science fiction movies about, extraterrestrials and things like that. And here I'm getting an official military communication. And the only thing, I couldn't imagine that anything we have or they have, as far as, Russians or anybody has any kind of technology like that. And nothing showed up in the newspaper. So,
so you
that
actually,
was my testimony.
So you witnessed a USO.
It was, well, the ship witnessed it. I took the official communication from the ship.
Right, right.
And it was a USO, underwater, unidentified submerged object, turning
Exactly.
into a UFO, a flying
Right.
object.
That is amazing. Wow. And I know you also told me about another experience you had, but I'm going to ask you about that a little bit later. Let's get back to the next question that I have for you is, at what point did you actually come into the realization that this wasn't just a government conspiracy theory to get personally
Well,
involved with this disclosure project?
well, I was involved before going to Washington. I was lightly involved with. Dr. Greer had like 400 hours of witness testimony, which he condensed down, on video, down to 4 hours. And also, Professor Loiter produced a 500-page briefing document, which is what you saw, all to give to members of Congress after the National Press Club. And so, before anybody ever saw the finished product, I had it in my hand, and a friend of mine, his father-in-law was the president of Lockheed International. And so I actually sat down for 4 hours with the president of Lockheed International. I know with all his CIA contacts, he might be a most incredible witness,
Right.
But the older gentleman, he was starting to fall asleep toward the end. But I became aware of the hundreds of witness testimonies.
Right.
If all these people with collaborating information who don't even know each other,
Right.
with official documentation, are all making this up in some type of mass hallucination, that would be far stranger than the reality that there's something definitely going on.
Right. Absolutely. And were you at all concerned about breaking your national security oath?
Well, when you go into the military, you're sworn to protect the Constitution of the United States against enemies, foreign and domestic. And all indications that I can see, just personally, is that we've had a domestic intrusion into our intelligence community and, with our government. And our legal counsel, Daniel Sheehan, because these rogue operations are outside the law of our constitutional government, they cannot cite the rule of law against us. And beside that, here's 21 of the 500 or 450 witnesses at the time that were willing to go in front of 22 cameras at the National Press Club, and each saying after their testimony that were willing to testify under oath before Congress. And if all of us got thrown into jail, it would bring a lot of undesirable attention. So I felt I had a good chance of making it out of there okay.
Well, speaking of getting out of there okay, if you remember, after our dinner that night, actually, you told me that Stephen Greer, I think, was coming to San Diego. You asked me if I could bring my team to protect him or something like that, because you were afraid for his safety. And I didn't tell you this, but that same night I had a dream. It was a lucid dream that I actually got shot by the MJ-12, the Men in Black, the Majestic 12.
Lucid dreams are fascinating. Just before getting on the plane to Washington to testify the next day, I had this incredible lucid dream. And, because I became aware intimately of all the witness testimonies I was going there with. And in the dream, each of us gave our testimony, and at the end, an MJ-12 operative came up and said, "Oh, this is a top secret project here. This is this one here. You've all broken your national security oaths. Blah blah blah." And all the witnesses had their mouths dropped because they knew it was a lie, because they knew what they were saying was true. And in the dream, I walked up to him and put my hand out to shake his hand. And I said, "I have to hand it to you. You guys have done an incredible job all these years keeping it secret, And in the dream, all of a sudden, it became aware that it was like it went into a higher spiritual level. You could say that.
Yeah.
What people do to other people, essentially, science is showing that we're all interconnected, and what we do to others, we essentially do to ourselves. Anyway, that was a dream, and
right.
when I actually went to Washington, they didn't need an MJ-12 operative to discredit the thing. The
Right.
mainstream media does an excellent job.
Although I got shot by a sawed-off shotgun by one of the MJ-12s, Men in Black. Seriously, that same night. Thank you very much. Anyways, I just thought that
Seriously.
was very. Yes, I never told you this, but that's exactly what happened. I actually threw myself in front of a child where this one of the Men in Black just fell over a table, and the sawed-off shotgun went off, and this bullet was coming toward me, and I was thinking, oh my God, brace yourself. And I threw myself in front of this child I was protecting, and then all of a sudden I had this huge hole as the bullet shot me, and I looked like that movie with Goldie Hawn where she had this hole in her stomach that you could see through. That's exactly. I thought it was extremely funny, but believe me, I was in pain somehow in my dream. But anyways, getting back to you again. So tell me, what what did you think was going to happen after the National Press Club World Disclosure event? What did you think?
Oh, well, at the time I was naive, and I'm still naive to some degree, on things, but I've learned a lot more since 2001. It's a how to say it. It's like you graduate from different levels, from one to whether or not the Earth is flat, and whether or not we're going around the sun and not the other way around. We're in the center of the universe, and then all of a sudden you start to realize, oh my God, we're not the only life in the universe. And then you start to realize that, it's not about all the UFOs going on. It's about what's going on here on Earth. So I naively thought with the testimonies, the explosive information about we have the scientists that can end the pollution in the world, replace nuclear and oil, that, we have 57 different species, bases on the other side of the moon. I thought this was going to change the world forever. There's no way the explosive testimony and the other witnesses that were all joined together testifying how it could not change the world. And so that's what I thought at the time, but I was naive, basically. Monique?
It looks like we may have lost her for a second.
No, I'm here. No, I'm here.
Oh, okay.
I was momentarily muted. So here's a big question, Dan. What was finally disclosed to the world at the National Press Club on May 9th, 2001?
Well, there was a couple of really important points that were disclosed. One, that our legal government was being basically denied access, and we had proof from at least two presidential administrations that this was going on. And, and back in 1989, when Sergeant Clifford Stone got out, which was part of a retrieval team, they had categorized over 57 different extraterrestrial species that they have, cataloged that have been visiting this planet. And,
wow.
And Carl Wolf, who was in the Air Force at a NASA facility, in Langley, actually witnessed seeing on the camera equipment a lunar base on the dark side of the moon. And I was in the Hilton Hotel with him before going to do our testimonies, and he was really nervous about this, and he thought it was going to be on the evening news the next day. Let's see, we have Donna Hare, who I toured the Capitol building with her. She was working with NASA. She was an employee with a secret clearance, and she testified that NASA sanitizes and airbrushes out the UFOs and things like that before releasing to the public, that there's no legal oversight to these unacknowledged black robe projects taking in enormous amounts of money per year. That's there's no accountability or tracking of these things because it's all under national security, right? Mm-hmm. And then the most important thing is there's technologies that we have, the scientists that could end the energy and environmental crisis that have been hidden in these black projects. We're talking free energy, over unity, anti-gravity, a whole slew of technologies that these scientists are willing to, once released from the National Security Oath, to come forward in an open, secrecy-free, scientific inquiry board and to demonstrate that these technologies are real.
Oh, right.
Also that the ET civilizations have not shown hostility, but have essentially just been shutting down our nuclear weapons, and that we have witnesses that have been involved in these rogue projects that have been targeting and shooting down the ET craft and retrieving them. And that back in the 50s, they had what was called alien reproduction vehicles, which is the technology that created these faster-than-light flying saucers that were made in USA, as testified by Mark McCandish. Let's see, Dr. Cal Rodson, who was spokesperson for Wernher von Braun, he was in on the meetings that had future planned false flag events that they were planning and orchestrating. The first one was the Soviets, which was a lie, because we know that General Reinhard Gehlen, who was brought in with Allen Dulles into the CIA, was giving all these false reports to Truman that started the Cold War, which they took in about $8 trillion. And then it was going to be rogue nations, and then we're going to have to have terrorists. And this was 2001 in May 9th. This was just 4 months prior to the 9/11 event. And that's just some of the explosive testimonies that were. In fact, I have a little audio clip. It's the longest clip I have. It's 6 minutes long, if you can bear with it. But I think
absolutely.
It's worth every second.
Yes, definitely. Let's go ahead and listen to that. I think it's very apropos to what we're talking about here. So I'm ready.
It's rare to have a show in the media that would play a 6-minute clip, and I bet you there's people out there hounding to hear the whole darn thing. So thanks, Dan.
Yes, definitely. Thank you.
Yeah. So, by the way, the first person who's talking is John Callahan, head of the FAA Investigations Division back in the Reagan administration. They had a huge UFO. They had all the information, ground radar, military radar, computer tracking information. CIA sworn in the secrecy, took everything from him so they don't release it to the public. But he had backups of all the information, which he brought with him. And he's the first person to talk here.
Very good. All right, let's listen.
The CIA, one of the CIA men told the people they were now sworn to secrecy that this meeting never happened and this event never happened. When I asked them why, I thought it was probably just a stealth bomber at the time. He says, well, this is the first time that we have recorded radar data on a UFO, and these guys are going to get all excited, drooling over all this data. I said, well, you're going to tell the public about it? And he says, no, we don't tell the public about this. It would panic the public.
I was stationed at Malmstrom Air Force Base, Montana, as a missile launch officer. I got a call from my security guard, primary security guard upstairs. I was downstairs 60 feet underground in a capsule, monitoring and controlling 10 nuclear-tipped Minuteman missiles. I got a call that morning that they were seeing strange lights flying in the sky. I got another call, and this time it was a more intense tone in the guard's voice. It was very clearly very frightened. He said there was a bright, glowing red object hovering outside the front gate. It was oval-shaped. He had all the other guards out there with their weapons drawn. My weapons started going down, one after the other. They went into a no-go condition, what we call a no-go condition. They were unlaunchable within minutes of having received that second phone call of a UFO hovering outside the front gate. We were informed that a similar incident happened at Echo Flight. They lost all 10 of their weapons, where UFOs were sighted over the launch facilities.
So we were taking pictures all the time for verification of nuclear disarmament. And there were some objects in those pictures that didn't belong there. The second prong to this whole thing is that a lot of people talk about conspiracies over shadow government. I'm willing to testify before Congress that these black operations do exist.
I was stationed at Langley Air Force Base in Virginia. In 1965, I was loaned to the Lunar Orbiter Project at NASA on Langley Field. I went to the facility, and when I walked into the facility, there were scientists from all over the world. A airman second class was in the dark room at that time. About 30 minutes into the process, he said to me, in a very distressed way, by the way, we've discovered a base on the backside of the moon. And then he proceeded to put photographs down in front of me, and clearly in these photographs were structures, mushroom-shaped buildings, spherical buildings, and towers. And at that point, I was very concerned because I knew we were working on compartmentalized security. He had breached security, and I was actually frightened at that moment. I worked there for 3 more days, and I remember going home and naively thinking, I can't wait to hear about this on the evening news. And here it is, more than 30 years later, and I hope we hear about it tonight. And I will testify under oath before Congress that what I'm saying is the truth.
I was able to go into restricted areas, which this was. And this was an aerial photograph of the Earth and the shadows of the craft or whatever it was. But I realized at this point that it's very secret, that it was kept secret, because I asked him, what are you going to do with this piece of information? And he said, we always airbrush these out before we sell them to the public. And it was a picture of a UFO. Another incident, I knew someone in quarantine with the Apollo astronauts. He told me that the Apollo astronauts saw craft on the moon when we landed. And that is what he told me. And he also was afraid, he said that the astronauts are told to keep this quiet. They're not allowed to talk about it. So I do want to let you know that I worked out there for a number of years, and I ran into this. So it's not something everyone knows that works out there for a long time. My boss didn't know about it. It's very strange because I don't know how they can do it, but they can let some people know about it and then others not. I'm willing to testify before Congress that what I'm saying is true.
That I was involved in situations where we actually did recoveries of crashed saucers, for lack of a better term, debris thereof. There were bodies that were involved with some of these crashes, also some were alive. While we were doing all this, we were telling the American public there was nothing to it. We were telling the world there was nothing to it. But the whole situation is, we've set back, we've told the American people that there's no such thing as UFOs. I've been involved where we have recovered these objects. We know them to be of extraterrestrials. I was the first person to go ahead and see that there were bodies on it. That would be the first of approximately 12 events. UFO crashes are not events that take place every day. They're rare. I know we're not alone in the universe. I know that the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. It's evidence that has been denied to the American people. I stand before you today in my almighty God, and I tell you this. If Congress calls me in, I stand here today prepared and ready to do just that. Governments must never lie to the people.
My question is to Clifford Stone. You said that you had seen aliens on a craft that had crashed. I wondered if you could describe what they looked like.
I could, but it would probably take a whole lot of time. The reason I state that, when I got out in 1989, we had cataloged 57 different species. You have individuals that look very much like you and myself that could walk among us and you wouldn't even notice the difference, except for some of the things that they might be able to go ahead, even in a dark room, and touch an object and go ahead and identify what color that object might be. They would have a heightened sense of smell, sight, hearing. Situation is that you had at least 3 types of the grays. You had some that were much taller than we were. The unique thing that I'd like to point out for the most part is that the entities that we did catalog were in fact humanoid beings, so to speak, not necessarily look humanoid or be bipedal such as we are. But apparently we got quite a few of the species out there that are humanoid in appearance.
So that's just a sampling of just a couple of the witnesses and some of the information that was released in front of a packed, National Press Club. It was like wall to wall, 22 cameras in the back room, everybody willing to testify and stating that they're willing to testify under oath before Congress.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I'm sure everyone will appreciate that. Oh, absolutely. I mean, how many times you actually hear actual audio of something this tremendous? I know Don Morshot has a question for you. Go ahead, Don.
Well, I'm glad you said that, Monique, because first of all, Dan, I feel so privileged to say thank you on the radio. That is one of the most complete, cohesive, and coherent pieces that I've ever heard that is so vastly encompassing of this thing. And it's too bad we don't have all the names of experts and such that are on there. I have several questions regarding this. One is, which members of Congress were there? I understand there were some members of Congress at the press club that were part of asking questions. And what other officials were on the receiving side of this? How else is this stuff being disseminated? My understanding is the general public listing can find or have access to this information, but how do they do it? And I understand there's a fee involved to try to go and support this information. But
okay. That's good questions.
Yeah, that's probably good for now.
Yes.
Okay. Well, it's interesting. The place was packed with the UPI, AP, all the major networks were there, and all the cameras in the back row. And the National Press Club had an online streaming video. The first hour, they had like 500,000 people logged on, ready to watch this, right? But the first hour was pretty explosive stuff, basically, talking about CIA directors being denied access and that we've already reverse engineered this technology and we've had it for many years, blah, 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 all this different explosive pieces of information. But the first hour was jammed, and our sources lead back to the NSA, but, I can't prove that. But, see, the answer to your question, you can go to disclosureproject.org, and people there's a link there for the video, so you can watch the full hour and a half of the video. And we're going to, in the rest of the show, we're going to get into answering a lot of your other questions too. Did I miss something?
Don, did Dan answer your questions?
Well, I tried to find some of the clips and things. I found clips on the conference where there was an actual senator, or Congress member, ironically Republican, asking questions of these people. So I thought there were senators or Congress representatives as part of the interview process. There was a panel that was asking questions of these people, like the one who said, "Can you describe them to us?"
You're thinking of the citizens' hearing that Stephen Bassett just recently did, his fantastic work that he's doing, that the mainstream media, like the Washington Post, making ridicule of,
That's
the same
different.
Situation. That was a different thing. That's where they had retired people from Capitol Hill, senators and things that were, they had like 40-some people that were giving their testimonies in front of it, in order to move forward with disclosure. But with this event that happened in 2001, it was not quite as tame. We had some pretty explosive information that was being released, and the place was packed with press. Not that I'm aware of, was there a lot of members of Congress. There may have been in that, but after the National Press Club, all of the witnesses gathered together in teams, and we had several meetings with about a dozen or two senators and congressmen with special meetings that we sat in. We brought them the 4-hour video and the 500-page document, and they were cordial with us, but you got the response that, okay, thank you very much. It's kind of like a hot potato. Nobody wants to do it on their watch, So that's kind of the response we were having.
So these are the senators and the congressmen on Capitol Hill after the event that you met with?
Right, yeah. We met with several congressmen and senators. Even on one, I was sitting with Captain Salas. Carol Rosin was there, and
Captain Salas, Robert Salas?
Yeah, and we were sitting in.
I interviewed him on my show. I think it was about 5 months ago.
Oh, fantastic! I love that man. He's a good man. Anyway, I said to him, if we're defrauding the public, we just went on national network, worldwide television, and if we're defrauding the public, we all should be, penalized.
Right.
All we're asking is, just to look into the subject. So, so that's pretty much the response
that you got. So
we got.
So
yeah.
I understand. I mean, you used to be an ABC newsman. How did you feel the media covered the press club event, pretty much?
Well, it was interesting because the media is like the bottleneck, so to speak, into the connection with the populace to the world, and it's kind of the filter in which information is delivered. And and what happened was they. I was wondering, how could they spin this one? How do you get around all the testimonies you just heard and take, if you're like a news reporter and you're taking notes on all this stuff, how do you get that we were wanting, the purpose of the disclosure was to have a congressional hearing on the matter. And what they did was they basically said, a group of scientists and witnesses basically want to have a congressional hearing that we're not alone in the universe, and that UFOs are real. And I have it's about a minute and a half CNN clip.
Oh, let's listen to that. Yeah, definitely.
CNN is the flagship, you could say, of PSYOPs, in the mainstream media. And everything goes through think tanks that carefully craft information in such a way in order to gain a certain perception. And with the way they did it, there's not going to be any alerting information. And here's the CNN clip.
Okay. Great.
Life on other planets? Some former military and government personnel say they have proof there is. Elaine Quijano explains.
We've seen the photographs and heard the stories of what some say is evidence of UFOs. Now a group of scientists, former Air Force and FAA officials, is lending its voice to the argument that we are not alone. Dr. Stephen Greer heads up the Disclosure Project, a group that compiles information from people who say they've encountered extraterrestrial forms of life.
We can establish through this testimony that these objects of extraterrestrial origin have been tracked on radar going thousands of miles per hour, stopping and making right-hand turns.
Since 1993, Dr. Greer says he has videotaped testimony from more than 100 people about what they say are close encounters. People like retired Navy Commander Pilot Graham Bethune, who believes he saw a UFO 50 years ago while flying to Newfoundland.
Then it appeared over to the right and moved out slowly and flew with us. It was still not at our altitude, but we could see the shape of it. It had a dome.
In addition, the Disclosure Project says it has documents supporting its case, including FAA records and CIA memos.
What do members plan to do with their information? They hope Congress and President Bush take notice. They want to see congressional hearings into the matter, despite criticism from skeptics.
Those that don't want to believe you will never believe you anyway, so it doesn't matter. It doesn't change the truth.
A spokesperson for the Senate Science, Technology, and Space Committee says no congressional hearings are planned right now. Elaine Quijano, CNN.
You see, that was a masterful psyops, because what they did was take out of the first speech that Dr. Greer did, where they clipped out the part that says, these objects have been tracked on radar going thousands of miles per hour, stopping and making right-hand turns, cut, and the next word he says after that, and we have already reverse engineered and studied these technologies and classified projects, and we have the witnesses, blah, blah, and so forth.
Right.
And then they, they little things like, what do they want to do with this information? They want President Bush to take notice, on something that has to do with, UFOs, and there's all these, and this was prior to 9/11, so there wasn't a lot of stuff on the board at that time. It was wide open, but they effectively diffused it completely.
So why do you think this major media, which covered the press club event, only wanted to say that it was a congressional hearing, to say simply that we're not alone, and just completely get rid of all the explosive testimonies?
Well, it's interesting because even just recently, Clinton was on Jimmy Kimmel Live 2 months ago, and you keep seeing the tagline, "We are not alone," says such and such. We are not alone. We are not alone is a PSYOPs term that they use to completely take the attention off of the illegal operations that are going on this planet, right, and that we're all talking about UFOs and things in outer space and whatnot.
Whoever thought that we were alone? I mean,
how it works for them is that, the CIA has controlled every single movie since 1951, the day there stood still with the scripts, according to William Casey, the CIA director for Reagan on a briefing. And every single, and even Spielberg went to the 1999 Bilderberg conference, because he's produced some of the biggest, ET type movies. And so what they do is they carefully influence the script, and you see all these evil alien movies, you keep seeing, and that's the only indoctrination the people on Earth have, is seeing science fiction movies. All this stuff, even when I was a little kid in the 50s watching, these movies, I had no idea that while we're watching these science fiction things, the real thing is going on.
Absolutely. In fact, they're probably doing it so they can let people know, see, it's just science fiction. It's nothing real. It's kind of like saying that King Kong is real and he's going to come and walk all over the town. I mean, it's science fiction.
It's just another. I'm sorry.
I wanted to ask you, before we go to the next thing, yesterday you told me about a gentleman that you met at a UFO conference. And he sat next to you. He was a mafia guy, an assassin. Can you tell us about that little story? I think it's fascinating.
Oh, that was a long time ago. That was in the 70s. It was. I just had my curiosity spike because of my military experience, and so I decided to go. I heard about this woman who was, channeling a space being. I thought that would be kind of interesting, to go see. And so I went to this UFO conference, and all the UFO types were around there. And this guy sitting in front of me with greased back hair, that looked like a hitman from the mafia. Well, it turned out he was a hitman from the mafia. And
well, he might want to not dress like that.
and so anyway, he was. I was just kind of a curiosity to me. I was just, I was new at all this stuff. I was just kind of watching, observing. And he met this lady named Marge, who turned out to be a long-term friend of mine afterward. He was with a cigarette in his hand, and he's shaking. And he's saying, "Look, I think you guys are a bunch of kooks, but I got to talk to somebody. I think I'm losing my mind, and, talking like that." And anyway, the being was using her voice box to talk. Anyway, what happened was he was up in the mountains and he was hunting with his buddy, and he got up early, and a craft came down, and two beings came out, and he was going to shoot him with his rifle, and they caught his attention. And as though they knew what to grab his attention with, was like $1 million. That's all. He tied up his circuits. All I could think of was $1 million. Anyway, took him aboard the craft, apparently, according to his story, opened him up with some laser beams. He's bending spoons and seeing past lives, opening a love for humanity, and his buddies can't relate to him anymore. Anyway, that's that's a pretty bizarre little story, but it did happen. So.
Well, that's good. I mean, so they actually care. I mean, you know what? I can't make out whether the aliens or extraterrestrials. I don't even know if I want to call them aliens, but for lack of a better word, if in your opinion, are they benevolent or malevolent? Because it seems like there are, since there are 57 different kinds have visited Earth, there are both kinds, right? I mean, what do you think?
It's hard to know what's in the minds of an extraterrestrial being, but from what I've seen from secret classified documentation, they have not shown hostility, and what little experiences I've had, I've not had any hostility, and I would say the majority of them are benevolent and not hostile. I don't know about all of them. There may be, some, but it's not something I'm fully aware of. I'm
right.
more aware of what's going on here with the
behind the scenes
humans here on
right. I understand, Dan. CBS sent a special assignment team to interview you, and made a promise that you could say that we have witnessed scientists with solutions for the world to get off nuclear, oil, and coal, but they couldn't keep that promise. So what happened there?
Oh, yeah. After, going to Washington, I was in San Diego, and from Los Angeles, CBS sent a special assignment team. And I told them on the phone, and before I did the interview, I said, I'm not willing to do this interview unless you can absolutely promise and guarantee that I can say on the air that we have the witness scientists within these black projects that can bring forth in the open, secrecy-free scientific community, that we have the solution to get off of oil and nuclear. I mean, you think about, Fukushima things going on, the Gulf oil spill, the pollution that, coal creates, especially the radiation thing. I mean, my God, look at just Fukushima is just one of hundreds of these dangerous, archaic, obsolete technologies that this group with this breakaway civilization, you could say, has keep the rest of humanity retarded while they have this super advanced technologies that Ben Rich said in 1993. He said, we've got the technology, anything you can imagine. We can take ET home, but it would take an act of God to get it out of the black projects. Anyway, they promised up and down, like I said. And basically they did a cookie cutter of exactly what CNN did, took the same information, and they interviewed me for 45 minutes. And the only thing that I got to say out of the interview was, we've reached a critical time where the truth needs to be revealed to the people. But, what happened was the producer was in tears because I made her promise, She says, I'm sorry, I never experienced this before. The higher executives made me cut that part out. And we know that the higher executives, we have a document Daniel Sheehan has of 42 CIA NSA operatives, and everybody knows, basically all the distribution of information that gets filtered through the CIA, which is tied into the Tavistock think tanks, and they all work together in order to control the perception of the reality through the mainstream media. And I have a little
Let's listen
clip
to it
here on CBS.
Yeah. Definitely.
And by the way, Dawn, I forgot to say, thank you for that kind remark. I haven't done these shows for ages. And I've just started to decide, I'm seeing the destruction happening on this planet, and, more people need to be aware. So, here's
really
the CBS.
Appreciate it. Maybe you can bring us more of these kind of clips and reports from time to time and keep you on here. I'd like to know when the next hearings are planned or the next events.
I'm sure we can cover a lot of time with this. Here we go with CBS.
All right.
We are not alone. That's the message a group of pilots, scientists, and former government officials want Congress to hear. Ken Shotnick shows us tonight what some people are calling a UFO cover-up.
I've never seen it. Look at that.
I don't know, but I got it on tape. A strand of moving light in the sky over Phoenix. A bright glowing streak dashing through West Covina. What looks like a flying saucer tracked on radar over Mexico City. Are these UFOs caught on tape? Dan Wills is a former radio operator for the Navy.
I took personally communications from ships that were reporting the extraterrestrial craft merging out of the ocean and shooting off into space.
He's among a group of scientists, military, and former FAA officials calling for congressional hearings to establish the presence of UFOs and extraterrestrials. 21 members of that group already have testified in Washington for what's known as the Disclosure Project. Dr. Stephen Greer is the director of the Disclosure Project. He's gathered 400 witnesses who say it's time for government secrecy to end.
We can establish through this testimony that these objects of extraterrestrial origin have been tracked on radar going thousands of miles per hour.
It's come to a critical point where the truth needs to be revealed to the people.
They believe a congressional hearing is the only way to set the record straight. The Disclosure Project has its work cut out for it because as of right now, no congressional hearings are planned. For CBS 2 News Special Assignment, I'm Ken.
You notice the tagline again, we are not alone, and using the same exact clip, about 20,000 miles per hour, right.
And there's no information given. It's all about just saying they're doing all the talking. They give these tiny sound bites. They want this to come out, but there's plenty of information you have, and they won't give any of it out.
Yeah, so basically they're talking, and they just give you a chance to say one sentence.
Yeah, it's sanitized, and the "We Are Not Alone" tagline would work for an agenda. Let's say since we do know they have the flying disc technologies, like back in even in the late 40s and early 50s, they had this technology. If they wanted to, like von Braun said, the final card was the alien card, which means they'd create a false flag, hoaxed alien invasion coming in. We'd have to drop our differences and unite in one world order, to fight this alien foe, as Reagan spoke of, and as Clinton spoke of on Jimmy Kimmel Live just recently. He just said, I hope it's not like Independence Day, but we would have to all get together and make nice, he says, to do that. So it would work for that agenda, that we are not alone, but illegal government operations already have technologies, been infiltrated into the government. Oh no, you don't want to get that out on mainstream media.
Right. I just want our listeners to know that we are talking to Dan Willis. His website, please visit it, thewebmatrix.net. Again, that is www.thewebmatrix.net. Dan Willis is top secret military witness that testified at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. in 2001. I just wanted to give that out for the second hour because we are going to go on a break in just a few minutes. Anybody wants to call us with any question, 347-688-2902, or just Skype us at Freedom Screen. Dan, before we go on a break, which is probably going to be one more minute, Don, do you have any questions that you want to ask really quick?
Sure. Well, one thing is that it sounds like you're saying they have this reverse engineered technology, yet these UFOs can turn down our weapons, but they haven't attacked us. So it seems that there really isn't a threat, just like 9/11. There isn't a threat out there, but they could try to attack at any time that they choose and fake a UFO attack with the reverse engineered technology to polarize people into giving them whatever they wanted, just as they did at 9/11. It sounds like that's the direction we're headed.
False flags have a long history of being used for exactly that. Yes, you're right.
And how can we, it sounds like we won't see these technologies freed up, but if some of these people have compartmentalized this technology and they've been part of these projects, there must be thousands of people with parts of knowledge. I'm wondering if there's ever a way to put this together so the public can actually see this stuff starting to be developed for our benefit.
Well, the degree and secrecy level and the compartmentalization of these unacknowledged special access projects, where unacknowledged means it doesn't matter if you're the president, CIA director, as we found out, will be denied access. So you're talking about extreme secrecy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I wanted to ask you, Dan, just before we go on a break, I wanted to ask you, do you have something coming up that maybe you'll be talking anywhere that we should be aware of? What's your project coming up? next?
No, just your show.
Okay, all right. And by the way, I do want to make sure that you come back to our show sometime in December so we can hear you talk a little bit more about what's going on. Because by then...
Love to.
Yeah, because Stephen Bassett is going to be on November 5th. I guess that's when his project is going to be going to Congress or something like that. And we'll see what happens after that. Welcome back to Revolution Radio, Private Eye Matrix Revealed. Again, I'm your host, Monique Dessan. And again, I wanted to remind everyone that Revolution Radio is the only 100% listener supported. So please, please donate by going to our website, freedomslips.com, and click donate. With us, we have Dan Willis. And his website, again, is the webmatrix.net. So that's www.thewebmatrix.net. Dan was actually Disclosure Project's top secret military witness that testified at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. in 2001 in front of every major media. And thank you for being with us, Dan. Are you still with us?
I am.
Great. We've been talking about a lot of things, and you have been providing us with a lot of audio MP3s, which really helps for our listeners to really listen to all of these things that actually is not just our imagination. It actually happening. It's happening now.
Yeah, I'm not making it all up.
We're not making it up. He definitely went there, and there are witnesses everywhere, and they're not that there's anything wrong with a regular person testifying to some of these ETs out there, but these are admirals and lieutenants and people who work for the Air Force and the Navy. They know what they're seeing is real. They have a lot to lose if they were going to lie about these things. Their reputation is at hand.
It's different when you're in a military capacity, because then you have official documentation, like Robert Salas, for example. He brought all the documentation of that event that happened at his nuclear launch facility by the Office of Special Investigations of the Air Force. He brought most all of the witnesses. A lot of them brought official documentation to back up what they were saying. I contacted the Office of Naval Intelligence to try to get a copy of the report. Unfortunately, it was destroyed, so I had my word.
Yeah, Dan, you're aware that every time there's something is going on, like the Fukushima, there's a nuclear plant somewhere, and there is always sightings of ETs out there, UFOs out there. It's not your, what do you think about that?
Well, yeah, especially, back when we blew our first nuke in 1945, there was a huge increase of sightings around nuclear facilities.
Right.
Like Larry Warren, for example, who was one of the 21 witnesses. He was at the Brentwaters Air Force in the UK, and extraterrestrial craft came in the forest outside the base, and they reprogrammed the nuclear missiles that weren't supposed to be there. They hit him up against the side of the head with a gun butt and made him sign all these papers that, I didn't see anything and everything. Yeah. Anyway, he when we were after the press club, he was on the phone. We were in the Hilton, and he was telling me the people in front of Parliament, they're picketing out in front of Parliament with signs that are saying, expose the secret government, release the extraterrestrial technologies. There were all these people picketing out in front of Parliament. It wasn't anything like that happening in Washington. It was just kind of amazing that the British were really catching on to it.
Right. I also know that you went on a disclosure campaign tour with Dr. Greer in some major Western cities. What was the response like, and what did the local media network that covered the event in each city, how did they do that?
Yeah, on the major cities, in Colorado, up and down, LA, San Diego, San Francisco, up in Oregon, all the major cities I toured with Dr. Greer, and we usually ran at huge halls like Masonic halls, and video projections, and we took the 4-hour executive briefing document and video rather, and condensed it down to 2 hours. But that wasn't enough, so we finally figured out how to get it down to 1 hour, because people just can't sit for 2 hours,
Really?
But every place that we went, we got standing ovations. People were applauding, and what we were basically asking, since the mainstream media sanitized it so effectively, we were thinking, well, this is kind of like a grassroots movement, and we can get people in the major cities to write letters to their congressperson, but what happens there again, people are just too busy trying to survive on this planet, and they really don't have time to write a letter to their congressperson about this. It's kind of like more of a curiosity, like what in the heck are they talking about? What is this? It's really interesting,
Right. Well, what I find interesting, Dan, is that just like Don was saying, in Europe and in South America and Central America, it seems like people are much more open to receive this kind of information. But in America, it seems like it's so much more secrecy around the subject of ETs.
Oh, yeah. I was with Jaime Maussan in Mexico, and I think, what was his name? The guy with the alien burrito. I can't remember his name. Anyway, this doctor, he hit an alien over the head and wrapped it up in a burrito, put it in his freezer.
Okay.
Yeah, there was about 7,000 people of Mexico I was on Telemundo television, and I was saying, look, we've got the technologies that can stop the pollution in Mexico City, which is horrible. And what's interesting about that experience, I went with a Spanish-speaking friend. Even my mother was born in Buenos Aires in Argentina, but I didn't pick up on the language, so I brought my friend down. And when we went back, we had a missing time experience. It was kind of interesting. We're like 4 hours were missing.
While you were in Mexico?
His wife. Yeah, well, when we went across the border, it was like exactly midnight. I just happened to know it, looked at the clock and everything. And when it was like going from the border there at San Ysidro, to up by Miramar, it's only like about a half hour at the most, right?
Yeah.
And I was in my little Porsche, and we were just driving along, and in fact, we were in a good mood, and we were actually singing as we were driving. And when we got, I thought the clocks went back, but both. I went up to Escondido, where I was with my lady friend, and I thought her clock stopped, but the same thing happened to him. And so it was like 4 hours missing time. Anyway, that's just another story.
So are you talking about going to TJ, not Mexico City, but going across to Mexico?
Oh, just in Tijuana.
Tijuana, yeah. Well, I know. That's only like less than half an hour.
Yeah.
So if you had 3.5 hours missing, that's interesting.
I tried to do a hypnotic regression to see if we could pull out anything, but
nothing came out.
They hit it well anyway, out of whatever happened.
Yeah, in fact, anyway. speaking of which, I had Carlos Guzman and Ruben Uriarte just 2 weeks ago. They wrote the book UFOs Over Mexico. So it's interesting because definitely Mexico is one country that, for some reason, attracts a lot of UFOs.
Oh, you're kidding. Yeah, for sure. Enrico, who was the head air traffic controller in Mexico City, he was with me along with another friend, and we were going on Capitol Hill to meeting with different senators and things, and he was getting barraged with his radar with UFOs all the time. Yeah, there's much more of a controlled airspace over the U.S.
Exactly.
in the Latin American countries,
and in fact even Europe. So why do you think the media is actually doesn't want to cover the whole story, or at least attempt to discredit the subject with the
Well, the TV cameras have come in and they interview Dr. Greer and they interview me, and they cut me out every time because I said, there's indications that our government's been infiltrated, and so cut, and so they kicked me out of it. And so what happened is I watched, and I just wish somebody would videotaping the videotaper, and what was talked about and how they took it and spun it, because every city without exception, in San Diego, on Channel 6, they had dancing alien dolls with smoke in the background,
Oh, no.
San Francisco, they said, oh, the Disclosure Project's looking to aliens to solve the world's energy problems,
And they laugh about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we heard in the background they were told to make fun of it. And in Oregon and Portland, they were talking about it, and then all of a sudden they all stop and look at each other and crack up laughing and say, oh, UFOs and free energy. Let's get to the big story. This week the Bozos meet the Broncos in the playoffs, and they go on into the sports, right? And so, without exception, and the giggle factor is basically because everybody on this planet has been, I hate to say it, falsely indoctrinated through our education system, through the mainstream media, to believe there's a certain reality, which has been, as I've researched, a company in Hollywood wanted me to do a report on how does media control on the UFO issue happen, why does this happen, and who's doing it. And if you look back through history, I went back like 100 years and started to see, like back in 1917, Rockefeller and J.P. Morgan and what was his name, Warburg, they bought up 25 of the main newspapers so they can control the perception. This was back in 1917. And then what happened at the end of World War II, Alan Dulles, who was working with the Nazis on all this stuff, he basically brought General Reinhard Gehlen, the head Nazi intelligence person, which had about 3,000 Nazi spies throughout the Soviet Union. So they had all the Soviet intelligence. And so what they did was they cut a deal with Truman at the time to take all the microfiche of all the Soviet intelligence reports and bury them in these little containers up in the Bavarian mountains. And so, because there was a huge paranoia about the Soviets at the time. And so, basically, they brought an entire Nazi network along with into the CIA, which was the OSS at the time. And, besides Project Paperclip, bringing all of the Nazi scientists into NASA. And then on top of that, all the top scientists were missing, along with 250,000 Germans and over 100 and some U-boats, the most advanced technologies, most likely at a base that they created down in Antarctica back in between 1938 and 1943 with their operations. And we have witnesses that have seen the documentation that they had these flying disc factories that had like I believe it was 9 of them, and some of them they put down in Antarctica, some they put in Brazil, some in Norway. And so the Nazis had planned what's called Weltanschauungskrieg, which means worldview warfare. And you know that Martin Boren, he took in Operation Eagle Flight all this huge amounts of money, including, and this goes into a whole long story, but anyway, they bought all these corporations in the United States and throughout the planet, and they basically infiltrated our national security system. So essentially we had 2 CIAs operating. We had one that was hunting down Nazis, and the other one was recruiting them. So we got this little split, and the trouble was the way Truman set it up. He set it with no congressional oversight, so that they had the perfect shield to be able to do anything they want. And Alan Dulles, as you know, he started Operation Mockingbird, which was the connection with all the different mainstream media outlets in order to control the perception of the populace regarding this issue. And you know, there's a long history. Anybody who does any kind of UFOlogy knows the long history of the Robinson panel and the Condom Committee and the Project Blue Book and the long efforts that have been done, and you know, people have been murdered in order to keep this whole thing under the wraps and keep it out of the public mind. That UFOs, the government, even back in 2011, I think Stephen Bassett organized a petition to the evidence, and we have all these witnesses, to the White House. And the Obama administration came back saying, you know, there's absolutely no evidence. And you're telling me that over 500 witnesses with supporting documentation is no evidence?
Right.
You know, so
that's crazy.
They keep this. The government keeps this stance of there is no evidence, and the media keeps saying we are not alone, you know, and then you go to the movie theaters and you watch these evil aliens coming to destroy us, and the scripts have been influenced by the CIA, you know, you know. So you have this.
People are waking up. I think that people are I mean, most people that I know, at least like-minded people, like they do believe. What you're saying is true. I mean, we are not. We're not stupid.
I'm saying, you know, please look it up. You know, you can look up back in 1946, after World War II, the Rockefeller Foundation, in concert with the Carnegie Corporation, they rewrote the official history of World War II to hide all this stuff and to hide banking connections. And the connections with the occult with the Nazis. They rewrote the history books that the kids in school now read. You know, when I started researching this stuff, and, you know, we're reputable historians and reputable references, you know, and it's that article on the webmatrix.net. Anybody can look, and, you know, and don't take anybody's word for anything. There's so much misinformation.
Yeah, people have to study it themselves and find out for themselves.
Absolutely.
So, Dan, let me ask you this. So do you think it's possible for these rogue operations to create a extraterrestrial threat false flag event? According to Warner von Braun deathbed testimony, as Carol Rosen testified.
Well, absolutely. Let's see, I have one clip here of one of the witnesses that joined us. By the way, there was 21 witnesses. One of them was Daniel Morris Slater, who was an NRO operative who was on these teams. You know, you hear of the Men in Black, you know, that come up and threaten people. Well, he was with that team that would do that, and if they weren't quiet, then another team would come in and with more threats. And if that didn't happen, then another team would come in and put an end to it one way or another. But he got up there in front of the microphone and he freaked, you know, because he looked at all 22 cameras and the whole audience were doing this in front of the whole world. And, you know, he's an older gentleman.
Right.
But that's why you want to hear 20 witness testimonies when you go here on the actual YouTube. But Mark
so
McCann,
this is only 23 seconds then.
On May 9th, 2001, yeah.
Okay.
Mark McCannish, who was a technical illustrator with a secret clearance, and his colleague, Brad Storison, was invited to a military exhibit at Norton Air Force Base, and this is like stuff back in the 50s that they were showing brass, what was called the alien reproduction vehicles. And I'll play that little short clip here, talking about actually seeing the hovering craft.
Okay, great.
Personally, it's 3 flying saucers at a very large hangar at Norton Air Force Base. The presentation that Brad talked about was for top military brass and certain congressional. But the fact that there were 3 discs at that exhibit, these discs were hovering off the floor without any visible means of support. They were referred to as alien reproduction vehicles.
Wow.
Now, what's interesting is I sat at the bar with him at the Hilton, and he had the complete diagram of the alien reproduction vehicle, and understood the mechanisms. And I have a good science background. So I
yes, you do.
everything with him on how it worked. And it's interesting, the center column tube, it had like a Tesla configuration around it with these capacitor plates on the bottom, and it actually had an old submarine battery that would start this thing up, right? You know, or 1950s. But the tube in the middle had a mercury vapor on it, and that caused a mass canceling effect to give an anti-gravity effect. And this thing could go faster than light. And what's interesting is, this is just I haven't seen this anyplace else, but I did my own research, and I found out in 1944 there was two Nazi U-boats that were sunk. One was off the coast of Norway. It had like 33 tons of containers filled with mercury, and another one that was off the straits of, anyway, on its way going to Antarctica, it had 67 tons of mercury in containers. And in fact, the one in Norway is still leaking. It's creating an environmental damage. I mean, that's a lot of thermometers for a war effort, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
And, you know, you look at the ancient, you know, and Himmler was all over the occult, looking all over the world for esoteric occult knowledge and things, and, you know, studied the ancient writings of India, where they're talking about the Brahmadas, and the Brahmadas talk about these, and they give detailed descriptions of these mercury engines, where you put this mercury and it creates this vortex. Anyway, it's interesting that the alien reproduction vehicle, the Nazi saucers and the Brahmadas all utilize the same element of mercury to create this anti-gravity effect. And from what I understand, you've probably heard of the Bell Project, which was
by the Nazis.
Highly classified project, which used counter-rotational plasmas of highly radioactive mercury that are going counter-rotational to create it actually could warp time around it. And all this came from back in 1919 with Maria Orsic, which was part of the Viral Society that was doing this channeling that got
Thule, right?
messages.
Is that the secret society Thule?
Yeah, the Thule, that you know, started the Nazis, basically.
Yeah.
They received from the Albarian, in the constellation of Taurus, 65 light years away, ancient Sumerian text that was in channeling that Dr. Schumann of the University of Munich, I believe at the time, looked at it and saw viable physics. And so, you know, together with that, along with the crashed ET craft, I believe it was like 1936, crash in the Black Forest, which they reverse engineered. So they had all these different elements coming in. You know, Lieutenant Colonel Wendell Stevens knew that he saw the documentation where they had these flying disc factories that they relocated to, like I was saying, in Antarctica and you know, Brazil and Norway. So. Can they pull it off? I think so, because you think about this is stuff back in the early 40s, and this is 2014. You can imagine with the Nazi drug money that they bring through, and the CIA, and all the you know, and American taxpayer money, of trillions of dollars, all funneling into these black projects with this breakaway civilization that's got unlimited funding, incredible, brilliant scientists from then to now, and with Ben Rich saying anything you can imagine they've already done. I'd say if they wanted to pull it off, they could.
Right, absolutely. Dan, I have a question for you. What are some of the indications out there that can reveal what was behind the warning to the public type speech that was made by President Eisenhower and Kennedy?
Well, you know, what's interesting is, you know, with Eisenhower, you know, Rockefeller funded Eisenhower's campaign. And originally, you know, Truman set up the Majestic 12 under General Twining's recommendation of like a secret government within a government that would be unaccountable to anybody, that would strictly oversee the UFO issue. And so Eisenhower, I think he owed Rockefeller a favor or something, but he did a secret executive order that replaced everybody within the MJ-12 with basically the Cabal's people, headed by Alan Dulles, of course, as MJ-1, and, you know, people from the Council of Foreign Relations, and all the people that are basically all connected with the Nazis, so to speak. And General Lufkin, one of our witnesses, was on Eisenhower's staff, and he was aware that, he had a contact experience back in February of 1954 with the extraterrestrials, and they wanted to do, the first group essentially wanted us to dismantle our nuclear weapons and in exchange helping us with our spiritual development. They didn't want to give us anything because they knew we'd misuse it.
Wasn't that the tall whites? Isn't that true that it was 1954 when he met with the tall whites at first, when he disappeared to, what was that, Palm Springs?
Yeah, that was Edwards Air Force Base. Yeah, and they had people from the Vatican, all those sorts of things. And what happened was essentially they cut a deal with the Zeta Reticulates, the Grenada Treaty. And so what happened is the corporations that Colonel Corso talks about, reverse engineering, very highly compartmented operations that would disseminate little pieces and technology out to the public. You've heard of the night vision, the Kevlar, integrated circuits, all those different alien-derived technologies from reverse engineering efforts. But they would keep the things like anti-gravity and free energy and things like that locked away. But what happened is our legal constitutional government basically got sold out. And I can play a little clip here of General Lufkin. It's only 42 seconds long.
Let's do it.
But what happened was Eisenhower got sold out. I think that he realized that all of a sudden this matter is going into the control of corporations. He realized that he was losing control. He realized that the phenomenon of whatever it was that we were faced with was not going to be in the best hands, and those were as far as I can remember, that was the expression that was used. It's not going to be in the best hands, and so it has turned out to be.
And so it has turned out to be. There's another interesting clip by General Lufkin talking about the acquisition of technology. It's a short one. I'd like to share it as well.
Okay.
We were in the basement of the Pentagon, and in those days, that was in 1959, there was a tremendous amount of security there in the basement of the Pentagon. Anybody who's worked there knows what I'm talking about. Colonel Hollibird brought out a piece of what appeared to be metallic, it looked like a yardstick. It had deciphering, it had encryption on it. He describe them as being symbols of instruction, and that's as far as he would go. But he did infer that the instructions, whatever they might have been, were something that was important enough for the military to keep working on a constant basis. It seemed giant-like when I saw it because it was the first time I'd ever seen anything like this before, and all eyes were just peeled on that particular thing. And when he told us what it was, it was frightening. It was eerie. You could have heard a pin drop in the room when it was first mentioned. Well, he said it had been taken from one of the craft that had crashed in New Mexico, and that had been taken from a box of materials that the military was working on. They didn't use the word reverse engineering at that time, but it was something similar to the reverse engineering. They felt like they needed to work on, and it was going to take years to do this. Extraterrestrial bodies, yes. There were either 3 or 5, and one was alive, partially alive at the time that this happened, and I do not know what may have happened to him after that.
I think it's important to hear the voice of a general who was actually on Eisenhower's staff.
That is amazing. I have to tell you. How do you how and when did you start keeping these and collecting them? these audios.
Oh, this is a long time ago. There's so much more. This is just the tip of the iceberg.
That is great. And Dan, let me ask you one more question. How does these secret societies that Kennedy warned about fit into all this?
It's interesting with secret societies. I've been in the Rosicrucian Order, which is considered a secret society since 1976, and I've never seen anything that has not been, benevolent, teachings about regarding consciousness. But you look at what Adam Weishaupt of the Bavarian Illuminati and infiltrating into the Scottish Rite of the Freemasonry, and you look at just about every president is Masonic connection. Also, you look at all the Masonic connections in NASA. There are only two presidents, Lincoln and Kennedy, were not affiliated with any. So it's just kind of interesting. And you look at Prescott Bush, who was he was cited for trading with the enemy under the Trading with the Enemies Act, of working with the Nazis. He was, George H.W. Bush's father, who all three, Prescott, George H.W., and George W., were all members of the Skull and Bones Society, which basically came out from, a death cult out of Bavaria. So they're all sworn to, you don't break a secrecy oath with that group.
But how do they actually maintain the secrecy?
It's there's a lot of threats that happen. Even Kennedy, he was sharing too much information with his affair with Marilyn, and there was a CIA wiretap that she was talking about a base with examining things from outer space and stuff like that. And she was planning on holding a press conference, and that was like 2 days before she was found dead. And then the lady who interviewed her, Kathy Killigan, I think that's funny to pronounce it, she ended up sleeping pills and the same thing, because she said, as long as there's a reporter alive, I'm going to break the lid on this story, and she ended up dead as well. So there's been a lot of threats. But anyway, I want to jump back on regarding the warning speeches that both Eisenhower, everybody's heard that speech, where he warns about the unwarranted influences, just before he leaves office within the industrial military complex, and only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can, guard against this thing. But the trouble is, as long as they control the mainstream media, the alert and knowledgeable citizenry is not going to happen other than shows like yours or any alternative media that can get information out, and people who have an inquisitive mind that just don't accept everything on face value and look a little deeper. That's the only way people can become aware. But I'd like to play just a quick clip here on John F. Kennedy.
Okay.
Well, on John F. Kennedy, it's interesting, is he said that they expand their sphere of influence through infiltration, and he tried to warn the public. He even did an announcement at Columbia University that said that, before I leave office, I must expose a plot to take the freedom away from the citizens, before doing this. And just before he was murdered, there was what's called a burned memo of an MJ-12 document that listed MJ-1, which was Allen Dulles, saying that Lancer, which was a code word for JFK, has inquired into our activities. The CIA. By the way, it's interesting that JFK fired Allen Dulles because of his activities that he was doing in the CIA. And then after he was murdered, he was assigned by LBJ to the head position on the Warren commission that determined that there was no conspiracy, involved, which they later found out there was a conspiracy. But, it's just kind of interesting reflecting back on Kennedy's speech regarding.
So you have an audio for that? Yeah.
I have.
Okay.
And, I just want to mention also, the very first CIA director, Admiral Hillenkotter, he said he was very much concerned and afraid of the secrecy regarding the UFOs. And he didn't say anything about the dangers of the UFOs, but he was for the dangers of the secrecy. And here's JFK in honor of him.
Okay.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed.
Yeah, that was in honor of JFK. One of our witnesses, astronaut, Edgar Mitchell, he said that there was a secret cabal. He said publicly that there's a secret cabal group that's been studying the alien bodies, and that John F. Kennedy was the last president to be briefed on the matter. And that, after Kennedy, you have LBJ, and you look from LBJ to now, basically, the cabal has, influenced, and it's all tied, as far as, pointing the fingers at who is this secret society, they have a lot of names, Illuminati, Rothschild, the banksters, there's this group network that, as they say, follow the money, and anybody can figure that one out.
Right. I know you have 4 audios that you want to share with us about the threats. Lufkin, Morris, Wayne Gans, and Jacobs. Do you want to play those too? We are getting closer to the end of our show. I think we have about 15 minutes. I want to make sure that I get those in.
Yes. General Lufkin was threatened, and here's his testimony.
Okay.
He was talking about being erased. And I said, man, what do you mean erased? He said, yes. He said, you will be erased. I said, how do you know all this? And he said, I know. He said, they'll go after not only you, he said, they'll go after your family.
And then Professor Jacobs was working with the Air Force that they were shooting a missile off Vandenberg, and a UFO comes in, circles a warhead, takes it out. CIA comes in, confiscates the film, and he's been harassed as well.
I've made no money from this. I've got nothing but pain and suffering out of talking about it. I've been harassed at my home. This was used against me partially in losing a job once in teaching. I've had a hell of a time after I've told this story, but I continue to tell the story because I think it's important for people to understand.
I sort of cut off a little bit there. But and Daniel Slater Morris, one of the witnesses that joined me, who was involved with the Men in Black operations, also had something to say.
Yes.
I would go interview people that claimed they had seen something and try to convince them they hadn't seen something, or they were. Well, if that didn't work, another team would come in and give all the threats and threaten them, their family, and so on and so forth. And they would be in charge of discrediting them, making them look foolish, or so on and so forth. Now, if that didn't work, then there was another team that put an end to that problem, one way or the other. Secretary of Defense Forstall was the first real powerful known person that was eliminated because he was going to release the information. And nobody has ever paid for that crime. That crime has never been really thoroughly investigated by forces to see what happened to him. But most people know that he was thrown out the window of the hospital, and he wasn't killed by being thrown out the window, but he never got up alive.
I was arrested. I had all my gear taken from me.
I just want to pause that one. It went automatically and played that one. I just want to say Forstall was up for psychiatric, and he was talking about the Nazi base and things like that because he sent Admiral Byrd, who's a 33rd degree Mason, by the way, on Operation High Jump with an entire military armada to destroy the Nazi base in Antarctica. But
isn't that the one from Center of the Earth project?
Yeah. Well, I don't know about the, but the flying discs came out of the ocean and they were attacked and wiped out half the military fleet. And he started talking about it, and so they had to do something. And this one's a Marine sergeant who was, I think, was down in Peru. A saucer came down and just sliced through the jungle like he said, like a butter knife went right through the jungle, and it was oozing this liquid. And anyway, he talks about how they treated him on that.
I was arrested. I had all my gear taken from me by men in black camis, had no name tags. They were older men, probably in their late 30s or 40s. There were other people, I guess they were government, I don't know. They were there, and they had containment suits. And then they put me on a cot that they had, and they had me cuffed with those, they had me cuffed both hands down, and then they had my legs tied together with those plastic fasteners that the police use. And they had a lieutenant colonel from the Air Force, and he did not identify himself. He might have, I just don't remember. And he told me, if we just took you out in the jungle, they'd never find you out there. And I'm like, well, and I didn't want to say, I didn't want to test him to see if you'd really do that. So I said, yeah. And he's like, you got to sign these papers, and you never saw this, and I don't exist, and this situation never happened. And if you tell anybody, you'll just come up missing. And he was a real abrasive. And they're yelling at me, and they're hollering and cursing. And you didn't see anything, and we'll do you and your whole goddamn family. And they're it was basically that for about 8 or 9 hours. And these guys, they're just off on their own. There's no oversight, no control. They just do whatever they want. They don't. I mean, and they're evil, man. These people are evil.
Yeah.
Amazing. That is amazing.
It gets intense.
Wow.
Some of the things
So-
these people do.
Motivates these guys. You think these are people like you and
hear
I.
about these
It's gotta be
people with
it's got to be brainwashed somehow. We lost
Don,
it.
you got cut off.
Well, Dan got cut off too. Who motivates these guys? These guys come out of nowhere. I mean, when I went down for the bridge, I went underneath the bridge, saw some clients. The bridge at night. I had my ex-wife with me, and this guy came down in all black, no insignia, with a submachine gun. Said, "What are you doing here?" I had an SUV, and I talked to him a little bit. I said, "Look, you guys don't have any signs up." I said, "Who are you with?" And he says, "Bridge Authority." So I've experienced these kind of people that don't give any ID. They don't have any insignia. He had not just flak vest on, but all the way up around the neck. The only thing he didn't have on was a full helmet, and he didn't have a Darth Vader thing on. But he looked me right in the face. I could see his face. I could identify him, which was interesting. And he's standing there with a submachine gun, hand on the trigger, pointed sideways, not at us, just talking to us. I said, "Look, I just came down to show him around." I said, "I'm sure you've run my plates, got my ID." He kind of smiled and laughed. I mean, it was like dealing with that, only in a friendly way. But I'm wondering, who runs these crews? I've talked to some of these secret ops people who were part of military operations, and they kind of buy the farm, but this is a whole nother echelon, another level of this stuff. And Dan, have you got any tell us as to why people would be part of these units? And what benefit are they getting?
Well, just like the scientists that we have in these black projects, they're not going to come out. Unless they relieved from the national security oath, they have their lives in danger. With the NSA monitoring every single communication on the planet, with their quantum computer artificial intelligence now, they can basically, figure out who's doing what and categorize people, and as a feedback mechanism for their psyops through the mainstream media. They can utilize this technology. It's incredible. Mm-hmm. The amount of surveillance that they can and do on people. So, it's the agency that controls these people is above the law, outside of congressional oversight. It's like they have their own Army, Navy, Air Force. They have their own everything. They have enormous resources, and it's what Richard Dolan talks about, a breakaway civilization. That they have enormous technologies, and they have their own team, their own security force.
Right. They don't have to lobby Congress or hold a bake sale to buy a bomber. There's unlimited. I mean, just even within the realm of the people I've talked to, like I said, who used to be a part of the Alcan thing to try to stop the Russians and secret ops, there's unlimited budgets just there on the books. So these guys don't seem to have to be accountable to anybody, and they have an unlimited budget. But I'm wondering, these guys that come and threaten the lives of others, they're not the billionaires, and yet they're working for them just like the old knights of the king to go and do the bidding. I mean, maybe MJ-12 is that effective.
Well, it takes a certain mentality, in order to be involved in this. And even if you are in a certain mentality, if they have severe methods, they have ways that keep people quiet.
Right, quiet. And I have one last question. I think before the end of the show, as we have like literally 5 minutes or less, I just want to make
it's gone so fast, hasn't it?
Yeah, and it's so interesting. And I want to thank you for sharing these audios. So why some presidents and CIA directors who would normally have an unrestricted need to know, they are also denied access to the UFO files?
Well, because they're not part of this group, and they decide what, for example, Jimmy Carter. Here, I'll play what one of the witnesses that joined me was Daniel Sheehan, the famous attorney.
Mm-hmm.
President Carter held a meeting with then the Director of Central Intelligence, who was George Bush Sr., and demanded that the Director of Central Intelligence turn over to the President the classified information about unidentified flying objects and the information that was in the possession of the United States intelligence community concerning the existence of extraterrestrial intelligence. This information was refused to the President of the United States by the Director of Central Intelligence, George Bush Sr.
There you have a congressional attorney who was involved in an Iran-Contra scandal, saying in front of major networks that a president is being denied access by George H.W. Bush. What a surprise, huh?
Yeah, really, that is amazing. Even the CIA director, that's just amazing. What about an average person thinks about all these issues?
I think the average person, what's happened is, since our history books have been rewritten, so we don't really know what happened after World War II, and even taken out all the different activities that happened in World War II, as well as the occult connection. And even 1957, there was a Professor Eikenson, I think, I'm not pronouncing his name, but in London, it said there was a conspiracy of 30 universities to take the elements of consciousness out of all the universities that have to do with psychology. So they're very afraid that, one, we become aware of that we've been indoctrinated into a false reality. In other words, our education, our movies, our media, the official denial that they do, and the ridicule, giggle factor. Yeah. And we have these elaborate props, we have rockets, of NASA. We're thinking that's our state of the art, while we still drive internal combustion engines and these dangerous nuclear power plants. And, the other thing is they don't want people to understand the power within them of consciousness and the interconnectedness of the reality, which is really right at the core, because the Nazis, they did a lot of research on this, and when they back in 1944, when they got the King Solomon's treasure, which had ancient knowledge of, they had tablets and scrolls of stuff that was back in the ancient mystery schools of Egypt that the Knights of Templar have been guarding all these years. Anyway, the Nazi commando going in there, and they huge amounts of gold and everything. They redistribute it throughout their whole system, and they also raided all the theosophical libraries, took thousands of books from all the libraries and ancient places. So somewhere on this planet, there's this enormous library of esoteric, occult meaning hidden knowledge about the workings of the universe, and so that's another thing that they're really afraid that people don't become aware of, just how powerful and how that we could possibly change this reality.
Yeah, and do you think that people want to know the truth or can handle the truth about illegal secret government operations?
I think the average person's so busy trying to just survive on this planet, and that, Hitler in his book Mein Kampf, he talked about the psychology of doing a big lie, like he did the Reichstag building when they did a false flag on that and blamed it on the communists. Hitler said, if a person tells a small lie, they can get away with it, but if you were told a huge, infamous lie, it actually has a bit of credibility to it, because nobody would possibly, in the average person's mind, tell such a huge, enormous lie like a false flag operation that was done. So people, I think, naturally just want to trust the news reporters, and all the news reporters and everything that are giving us our news, they're basically good people doing what they believe is right. But I used to be an ABC newsman. I used to rip off the teletypes of American Press and United Press International, and I used to do the news report on the weekends. I was a broadcast engineer in San Diego, and who is distributing that information? I saw on Russia TV there was this little funny where they took all the network televisions across the United States, all these different networks, and there was this one line that said the economic sanctions have lost the spring and the Easter Bunny's step this year, an unusual statement. And it's kind of comical. You have about 30 stations, one after another, saying the exact same thing. So basically all these news reporters are reading the scripts that are controlled by the CIA, and the CIA is connected with the Tavistock Institute, which puts in billions of dollars into think tanks, and they have the art of psychological perception down to an exact fine art to know how to create what they called, Edward Bernays said it, called it engineering consent.
I can't believe it. I had one last question.
Are we running out?
Yes! Dan, I have to bring you back. Thank you so much. Yes, Don. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for being with us. Thank you, Dan, for joining me on this show. I'm Monique Destan, the owner of I Investigate, and my website is iinvestigate.com. And if you do want to go to Dan Willis' website, and that is, I'm going to let him tell you.
www.thewebmatrix.net. If the company in Hollywood wanted me to write an article on media control, and you can look back 100 years and see, and do your own research. Thank you so much, Monique.
Absolutely.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio.
We're an anarcho-syndicalist commune. We take it in turns to act as a sort of executive officer for the week. Yes. But all the decisions of that officer have to be ratified at a special bi-weekly meeting. Yes, I see. By a simple majority in the case of purely internal affairs. Be quiet. But by a 2/3 majority in the case of more... Be quiet. I order you to be quiet. Look, you stupid bastard, you've got no arms left. Yes, I have. Look! It's just a flesh wound.
I don't believe I've seen such a display of courage, skill, nerve, grace, and stupidity.
I'll do you for that. Oh, what? Come here. What are you going to do, bleed on me? I'm invincible. You're a loony. The Black Knight always triumphs.
Roundtable Live, Monday through Friday, 1 a.m. till 4 a.m. Eastern Time. Bring your mind, bring your ideas, bring your voice. King Arthur had nothing on us. Here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com.
Hi, everybody. It's me, the Fetch, host of Inside the Eye Live. Before the Sunday mainstream media political pundit talk shows, there's Inside the Eye Live, where we break down some of the weekly mainstream media talking points before the talking points even get aired. Add in some entertaining stories, weather, cats, intriguing and informative guests, and you get one of the most listened to Saturday morning streaming media political talk shows going today. And it's all right here on our flagship station, Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. So join me, the Fetch, for Inside the